The illegal Russian war of aggression against Ukraine has been raging for more than 2 years now. Despite having claimed the lives of 50,000 Russian soldiers and 31,000 Ukrainian soldiers, this unnecessary war of aggression waged by Putin to restore the former glory of the Soviet Union and to establish a new world order under heavy Russian influence continues with no end in sight. Even as we speak, thousands of young Ukrainian and Russian souls perished on the Ukrainian battlefield. I have noticed that no one from Malaysia has been making updates on the Russo-Ukrainian war. Then I thought to myself, why don't I make it? I would love to tell the sufferings of the tens of thousands of Ukrainian soldiers who gallantly resist Russian military might with their dedication and patriotism. From today onwards, I will try to make monthly updates on the war. And as usual, feel free to comment your thoughts down below and tell me what would you like to hear about this tragic war. After the Russian withdrawal from Kyiv and the highly successful Ukrainian Kharkiv and Kherson counteroffensives in 2022, the front lines have been pretty much stagnant throughout 2023 with no significant gains from both the Ukrainians and the Russians. After the extremely important 2023 Ukrainian summer counteroffensive failed, despite some cross-border raids carried out by the Freedom of Russia Legion and the Siberian Battalion in Kursk and Belgorod Oblasts, large-scale fightings and major battles were limited to eastern Ukraine. So, where should we begin? Let us begin with the Battle of Avdiivka. It is widely believed that the recent Russian success began with Avdiivka. Avdiivka is located in the center of Donetsk Oblast, eastern Ukraine. It is about 24 kilometers from the capital of Donetsk Oblast, about 91 kilometers southwest of Bakhmut, which had been captured by the Russians last year, and about 84 kilometers south of Chasivyar, which is the next strategically significant Russian target in eastern Ukraine. Avdiivka holds significant strategic and logistical value for both the Ukrainians and the Russians. It is now the gateway to the provincial capital of Donetsk. The Ukrainians want to hold it and use it as a springboard to reclaim its lost territories in eastern Ukraine, while the Russians wanted to push the front line further away from the provincial capital of Donetsk Oblast and likely use it to expand its battlefield against westward. With its significant strategic value, the Ukrainians fortified the city with trenches, pillboxes, minefields, and made good use of the Avdiivka coke plant to make the Russians pay for every inch of Ukrainian ground they capture with blood. On a side note, the coke plant does not produce the infamous Coca-Cola soft drink. Instead, it produces coke, a porous coal-based fuel with a high carbon content and few impurities. It is an important industrial product used primarily in iron ore smelting. Smelting is a process of applying heat and a chemical reducing agent to an ore to extract a desired base metal product. Before we go into the details of the battle, we need to identify a few critically important Ukrainian strongholds defending Avdiivka. The first stronghold is the Yasinovata train station 2, followed by the Saska Okota restaurant, the Zenit air defense fortification located south of Avdiivka, and finally, the coke plant located in the north of the city. And of course, other parts of Avdiivka were all fortified with trenches and makeshift pillboxes. Some buildings that survived the relentless Russian artillery and airstrikes were also used as fortified defensive positions. The defenses in Avdiivka were mostly manned by soldiers from the 110 Brigade, supported by the 47 Mechanized Brigade and the drone platoon of the 59 Motorized Brigade. These Ukrainian defenders were pitted against units from the Russian 2nd and 8th Guards Combined Arms Armies, 41st Combined Arms Army, 90th Guards Tank Division, Storm Z Panel Unit, 1st Donetsk Army Corps, 2nd Guards Lugansk Severodonetsk Army Corps, and the Russian Air Force. The primary task of these Russian units was to cut off the main supply route into Avdiivka, the 00542 highway, close to the Avdiivka coke plant. Cutting off the supply route will degrade the defenders' defensive capabilities, because no howitzers can fire without artillery shells, no guns can fire without bullets, no ATGMs can stop tanks if they have no missiles to fire, which is why no armies can fight without maintaining an efficient supply route. Cutting off Ukraine's supply route into Avdiivka will starve the defenders and prevent resupply effort of depleted munitions. and this would ultimately allow the Russians a smoother operation to capture Avdiivka with minimal losses. After more than a year of intermittent fighting and skirmishes on the outskirts of Avdiivka, Russian forces launched a major offensive on this heavily fortified city on 10 of October 2023. At the beginning of the major Russian offensive on Avdiivka, Russian forces employed large armored forces to attack the city from the north, west, and south. The Russians attacked Avdiivka using armored assault groups and attack helicopters supported by artillery. But these tanks and infantry fighting vehicles quickly got pulverized by Ukrainian artillery, FPV drones, and anti-tank missiles. By November of 2023, Russian forces resorted to the most basic of army combat tactics. Instead of deploying large armored formations to fight, Russian forces used small infantry groups to conduct assaults on Ukrainian positions supported by artillery, drones, and aerial glide bombs. These infantry assaults continued into January 2024 with minimal gains. Throughout this period, Russian forces continued to pressure Avdiivka on all three sides. But things started to turn in favor of the Russians in middle of January 2024. Russian forces from the 55th Mountain Motor Rifle Brigade and DPR's 132nd Motorized Rifle Brigade, 1st Motorized Rifle Brigade, the Veteran Reconnaissance and Assault Brigade, and 9th Motorized Rifle Brigade had broken through Avdiivka's southern defenses around the Saska-Okota, Skotovata-Daka area, and the Sand Quarry, making tactically significant gains in the south. Progress in the south was reportedly due to Russian tunneling tactics, using all water supply pipes from nearby Spartak to bypass and infiltrate Ukrainian defenses on the ground. According to reports from the Ukrainska Pravda, Russian troops made use of the decades-old underground water pipe connecting Avdiivka with the Donetsk water filtration station at Spartak to infiltrate Ukrainian frontline in southern Avdiivka. Russian soldiers drained remaining water from the pipe, cleared debris, and opened exits in the pipe every 100 meters using power tools. By early February 2024, Russian forces made confirmed gains east of Opitany and began to pressure Ukrainian defenders defending the key fortified air defense complex Zenit. For years, Zenit was responsible to counter any direct Russian assault on Avdiivka from the south. By 2nd of February, Russian forces made confirmed advance and have captured most of the Daka area located northeast of Avdiivka. Russian troops continue to make progress for the next few days, pressuring the exhausted Ukrainian defenders from the 110th Brigade from all directions. As shown on the map now, the area in dark red marks the area controlled by the Russian military during the final stages of the Battle of Avdiivka. Between 8 and 14 February, Russian forces advanced in the north and advanced in central Avdiivka. Russian Air Force had exploited the lack of Ukrainian anti-air capabilities in the vicinity of Avdiivka. FAB-500 and FAB-1500 glide bombs were extensively used to smash Ukrainian defenses. The use of these cheap bombs equipped with guidance package and wings had directly contributed to the Russian victory at Avdiivka. Besides pressing in the central Avdiivka, Russian forces concentrated efforts on the northern axis, aiming to choke and cut off the last Ukrainian supply route and ground line of communication into Avdiivka. In the south, defending the Zenit fortification complex had become impossible and insignificant. The remnants of the defenders hastily fled their positions on the night of 14 February under heavy Russian artillery and drone strikes and were forced to leave their wounded comrades behind, an act that will continue to haunt the surviving soldiers for years to come. The Russian unit that captured the Zenit fortification complex was the Russian 1st Army Corps. This unit reportedly executed wounded and unarmed Ukrainian soldiers left behind in the fortification. One day after Valentine's Day, 15th of February 2024, the Russians successfully cut off the 00542 highway, the last supply route into Avdiivka, and were advancing towards Lastochkany. At this moment, the Ukrainian defenders were pretty much doomed should they continue to stay in Avdiivka under increasingly deteriorating situation. Finally, on 15th of February 2024, the Ukrainian military had decided that continuing to defend Avdiivka will not bring fruitful results and will likely drain its already strained manpower even more. Some Ukrainian units were already retreating from Avdiivka towards the west. On 17th of February, Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, General Alexander Syrsky, confirmed that Ukrainian troops had completely pulled out from Avdiivka towards more favorable defensive positions west of Avdiivka. That marks the end of the brutal Battle of Avdiivka, with Russia securing its first battlefield success after Bakhmut. Even though the Russians eventually emerged victorious in a bitter battle against stiff enemy resistance and capturing the strategic city of Avdiivka, their losses in equipment and manpower to capture this city were way too big. Instead of calling it a decisive victory, I think it is more appropriate to call it a Pyrrhic victory. The Ukrainians, although defeated at the Battle of Avdiivka, had held on long enough to inflict heavy casualties and equipment losses on the invaders. Russia reportedly lost more soldiers in the Battle of Avdiivka than its 10-year military campaign in the 1979-1989 Soviet-Afghan War, as shown on the screen now. According to Ukrainian sources, Russian troops involved in the operation to capture Avdiivka suffered 17,000 soldiers killed in action, 30,000 soldiers wounded in action, 364 tanks destroyed, 748 armored fighting vehicles destroyed, 248 units of artillery pieces destroyed, and 5 aircraft shot down. The loss of Avdiivka can be largely attributed to delay in military aid by the United States. Even though the loss of Avdiivka dealt a significant blow to the morale of the Ukrainians and the entire Western world, the outcome of the entire war will not always be decided by the loss of one strategic city. After securing the only operationally significant victory on the battlefield 9 months after Bakhmut, Russian forces sought to exploit this initiative on the battlefield and the ammunition hunger plaguing the armed forces of Ukraine due to delay in the $61 billion American aid to achieve maximum expansion towards the west of the current front line. The Ukrainians, already in a dire situation, braced for an imminent major Russian offensive expected to happen in the summer of 2024. New Ukrainian defensive positions west of Avdiivka were insufficient to stop Russian attacks. These defenses consist only of very basic earthen fortifications such as trenches and some makeshift machine gun pillboxes. These rudimentary fortifications are the reason why the Russians are able to push as far west as west of Russo-Ukraine, 3 months and 1 week after the fall of Avdiivka. At the same time of the Battle of Avdiivka, Russian forces are also trying to take Chasivyar, a highly strategic fortified town directly west of Bakhmut. Chasivyar's strategic value is much higher than that of Avdiivka. It is situated on elevated ground. Everyone with basic military knowledge knows that militaries around the world will always try to occupy elevated ground in the area of operation. High ground provides better vantage point for surveillance on lower ground, gives commanders better understanding of the terrain, movement of troops, and situation awareness. From a defensive point of view, defending high ground allows the defending army to concentrate all available firepower on the enemy attacking uphill, which is why the Ukrainians desperately want to keep this defensible high ground. On the other hand, as mentioned in the first advantage of high ground, the Russians want to capture Chasivyar and use it as an artillery observation post to bombard Konstantinivka, Druskivka, and the major provincial cities of Kramatorsk and Sloviansk. Russian forces will also use Chasivyar to attack downhill towards the before-mentioned towns and cities. So, the Ukrainians have to make sure the Russians do not gain this advantage. As of 29th of May, Russian forces are making steady gains on the outskirts of Chasivyar. These advances occurred near Kryhorivka, Kalinivka, Ivanivsky, Klishchivka, and Andrivka. Positional engagements continue along the entire front line during the strategically important battles of Avdiivka and Chasivyar, but neither the Russians nor the Ukrainians make any operationally significant breakthroughs. Ukrainian forces have very likely stabilized the situation on other sectors of the front line. On 10th of May, to the Ukrainians' surprise, Russia opened a new front north of Kharkiv Oblast. The Russians have assembled a 35,000-strong force to attack northern Kharkiv. The city of Vovchansk, the settlements of Staritsia, the district of Hleboki, and Liptsy bore the brunt of the renewed Russian offensive in Kharkiv. But it is very unlikely that the Russians are planning to capture Kharkiv city, the second largest city in Ukraine. After all, an army of 35,000 is inadequate to take such a large city. Putin himself admitted that the current ongoing operation in Kharkiv does not seek to capture Kharkiv city. It is more likely that the Russians are trying to create a buffer zone to push Ukrainian artillery units away from the Russia-Ukraine border, thus preventing Ukrainian artillery from pounding Russia's Belgorod Oblast. That pretty much sums up this episode of Peace and Conflicts on the updates of the Russo-Ukrainian War. If you like this video, share it to your friends and everyone you know so that no one gets left out of the heroic Ukrainian resistance against Russian aggression. Leave a comment down below. Tell me what do you have to say of this war. We are about 8,248 kilometers from Ukraine. The horrors of war seem far from our daily life. But I guess it's important for us to understand wars, particularly the Russo-Ukrainian War in the 21st century. It is a war pitted between the defenders of freedom and a bunch of brutal bullies, led by a senseless dictator. It is a war to defend the true values of a democratic country, and the Ukrainians, in the face of the overwhelming odds against them, continue to show the world what valor and gallantry mean. Thank you for watching, and I will catch you in the next one. Slava Ukraini!
Yeah.